Hello. In my last two videos, I talked about how my voice was affected by psychogenic dysphonia caused by racism and the associated trauma of those experiences. I went on to tell you a little bit about how my vocal cords and that damage were further exacerbated by something called Bogart Bacall Syndrome. I then went on to tell you a little about what I call the currency in human colour labels, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that. So, the currency in human colour labels. These terms are used today in an attempt to further the desires of white people in separating others from the human race. This human color coding labels white as the fully human and default color, in line with earlier European assertions that anyone other than they were subhuman. These constructed terms, made up by white people, are allocated status positions, with black being the least valuable human currency position presently. Jewish and Asian people, especially those from Pakistan, were previously allocated the lowest human currency status. Irish people have been referred to as the blacks of Europe and green. How the Irish became white, by American author and historian Noel Ignatieff, explains how they acquired their white human currency status. This book provides an example of when the abused became the abuser. Irish people had previously been empathetic and shared similar experiences with African Americans. Some of those experiences included their own indentured servitude and the chattel enslavement of African Americans. In 1863, oppressed Irish Catholic immigrants collaborated in the oppression of African American people. In their desire to increase their human color currency, they slaughtered African American people and decimated their property in order to secure a place in the white republic. Human color labels were used to enforce the idea of African American people as property, effectively dehumanizing them. Dehumanization is a form of moral disengagement, the denial of full humanness in others, and the cruelty and suffering that accompanies it. Dehumanization is intrinsically connected with violence. Often, one cannot do serious injury to another without first dehumanizing him or her in one's mind. Dehumanization is used as a tool in rationalizing brutality and acts of savagery, as seen in the enslavement and treatment of African American people. It could be argued that new generations replicating modern-day racist lynchings are affected by their own dehumanization of others and have become dehumanized themselves. European colonials have a history of public executions and lynchings of black people, many with impunity. Lynchings are violent and public events that traumatize black people across the globe. For trauma to be experienced, one doesn't have to be present, as is well documented in examples of domestic abuse. Witnessing abuse can be as traumatizing as being the target of it. In the past, these mob-led public murders were attended by huge crowds, the atmosphere resembling that of a carnival. Many took photographs of the brutalized bodies and sold them as entertaining postcards. That others bought them speaks to the state of their minds, indicating their desensitization and dehumanization. These crowds included law enforcers and children. Exposing children to acts of inhuman terror in this way would have desensitized them early to the brutality and dehumanization of Black people. Thus, the continued cycle of subsequent generations indoctrinated and groomed in this regard. European immigrants across the globe have built their respective nations on the dehumanization and genocide of Black people. To date, Europeans don't want to admit to genocide. In order to avoid such an admission, they must keep the secret. It is the foundation of their seized human currency position. They also must continue to deny their own dehumanization. As the Europeans claim to have civilized half the world through religion and colonization, they can't afford to be seen as dehumanized or uncivilized. This secret, coupled with denial, has led many to develop post-traumatic stress disorders and to employ cognitive dissonance as a coping strategy.